welcome back to another episode of the Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and today I am so honored to have with me Pastor Mark Ribbins. He is the pastor of Avon Avenue Baptist Church in Cleveland, Ohio. So hello, big welcome all the way from LA to you.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here with you. How's your morning so far?
Wonderful. It's a blessing to wake up. I have so many people that I started this journey with called life that are not here with me today. So I take every day I open my eyes as a blessing. So
that's for sure. Agreed.
Now, I want to spend some time talking about something that is very special to us, and that's the Black church. Now, I took some time before this show to watch a few of your Sunday sermons on Facebook. And that's the beauty of today's technology is I can go to church in my pajamas with my scarf still on my head,
right.
which is very different from when I was a little girl and mom did my hair the night before and laid my clothes out. And she would send me to church on Sundays and she would wrap a quarter in a handkerchief and tuck it in my pocket for Sunday service. But
real old school.
Oh yeah, yes, I'm real old school, but things have changed along the way. And I guess first and foremost, I want to ask you as we get into this with the Black church, do you embrace where we are today, or do you miss the old Black church?
There's a little bit of both. I've always been kind of a early adapter as far as tech. Mm-hmm. I remember in the early 1990s telling friends of mine, there's this new thing called the internet and email, and 10 years from now, nobody's going to send letters, and everybody thought I was crazy. Mm-hmm. So on that end, I was out front. I was not one of the pastors like many that I know who didn't have a social media presence, didn't care to be on social media and so forth. So we were able to embrace early on being able to bring the message in a different way during pandemic. That said, the gathering is missed. You miss the people, you miss the embraces, you miss just being in fellowship together. Mm-hmm. So while I'm enjoying being able to have people sit in their jammies and their sweats and watch service, I do miss having those people right there next to you. There's nothing like that feeling.
Okay, great. I think, especially with the pandemic, people still need to have their spirit fed more so than ever. So it's refreshing, or it's nice that we have this option to watch our services online. Now, going back to the Black church. Well, first of all, let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Did you always want to be a pastor?
What is a difficult thing. I felt the calling on my life when I was about 11 or 12 years old.
Okay.
I came up in unique circumstances. My family owned a Christian bookstore. Okay. So everything from Bibles to robes and records and CDs we sold. And so I was steeped in that type of knowledge. And when I was about 12, I realized, okay, there was a calling on my life, and I ran from it as long as I could. Mm-hmm. I didn't go into ministry until I was in my early 30s. So, but from that point, I realized, okay, this is something that I'm prepared and equipped to do.
Okay. Now, I also want to let the audience know, because sometimes people get the impression that pastors are these very stiff, rigid people, but you're called the jazz pastor. Is that correct?
The jazz preacher, yeah.
And that is because why?
That's because I spent a good 25 years of my career working at a jazz radio station.
Okay.
As an announcer and as a program director, which is an experience I wouldn't trade for anything. And I just love the music.
Okay. Yeah, there's we tend to, I'm originally from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So, I come from that very traditional Southern church style. And there was always this message of, if you step outside of and go sort of secular or blues or whatever, you're outside of faith. So it's very interesting to see it come full circle. So
one of the most wonderful things that happened to me early on in my ministry is a pastor here who has since retired invited me to come and give a message at his church. And he was a jazz fan also. So he got up and he was making this introduction and to the congregation. He says, you may know him from his family's business. You may know him from this. And you probably hear him over on 107.3 The Wave. And it was crickets. And he took a pause and he said, y'all can sit here and act like you don't listen to it if you want to.
We know.
Amen, amen.
We know. True. Now, one of the things I want to discuss, I mentioned earlier that I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and my mother's family home, right in the backyard, there's a very small church. It's been there the whole time since I was little. I remember it. If on Easter Sunday it holds 100 people, I'm probably stretching it. I doubt it even holds 100 people. But within the community that it sits, within the few blocks that surround it, it has always been a very strong presence in that community. It does food banks. You have job training there. This pattern or this cycle that historically Black churches have served in our communities. Now, help me out. I really, really struggle with the mega church, and it might just be because of how I was brought up, that I could touch my pastor. I could knock on my pastor's door and have a conversation with him. I could, I would know that my church was really touchable and in my community. I know mega churches where you can't even get married in them. Mega churches where pastors won't officiate funerals if tithes are not paid or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put you in a predicament or a pickle or whatever, but is
problem.
is the mega church really benefiting our Black community and the needs that we serve being so large? And I guess I want something more touchable, something I can feel.
Here's where I stand on that.
Okay.
The mega church is a movement that I believe has been and can be truly effective. Mm-hmm. I think the problem comes in with the mega church is when it becomes, and I'll put it on leadership. When leadership becomes distant, that becomes a problem. Now, I can't say, TD Jakes can't know every member by name. Mm-hmm. But I know ministers here in town who have memberships of 2,000-3,000 people, and they do their best to know families, to know someone, to be connected, to know faces, and not just to palm you off on someone else. When it becomes a cult of personality where, I am the face of the church, I am the preacher of the church, but I don't want any of the people near me, then you're not shepherding. And I'm not saying you got to know everybody, because Lord knows that even with a couple hundred people, I still struggle with names sometimes. But to have that shepherd's heart that says, I am here for you. And sometimes that will manifest itself in a we are here for you. So, okay, there's 5,000 people. I can't be here for everyone, but we have staffing. But I don't like where churches and ministries specifically distance their pastors, or pastors specifically distance themselves.
Gotcha. And like I said, me coming from the base that I come from, I just remember my pastor, he was firmly cemented in the community. Like, he worked a job during the day with the people in the community. He would get off work and go to the hospital for, to say a prayer with brother so-and-so that was sick. Then he would run to church and do Bible study. But, he was in the community that he was, pastoring. And I guess it just really gave a better sense to the congregation that he was touchable. And I really, and like I said, that's my personal struggle with me. I mean, however your soul and your spirit gets fed, you should go there. But for me personally, I just really I like to be able to touch you. I need to talk to you.
Well, and I think that what you're stating is part of the reason why some of the younger generations have drifted away, because there's
Yes.
not that personal connection. One of the things, I've been at my present pastorate for 2.5 years, um, and served as an interim minister there before that. So basically about 3 years I've been there. And one of the things that we've worked hard to do pre-pandemic is to not let youth church be a completely separate thing.
Mm.
Um, I would do a thing. We had after service one Sunday. My cousin's a chef. I had him cater in some sandwiches and things, just to sit down with the kids, talk with them. What do you like about your church? What don't you like about your church? What do you like to see? So that they know, okay, pastor is reachable. It's not just, the grown folks on the other side and we're over here, because we're finding when they hit the teenage years, and if we're not speaking specifically to their problems, if they don't feel like somebody cares about what they're going through, or just shuffles them off with, oh, well, just pray on it,
Hmm.
then they're out the door to whatever the next step is.
Yes. And you mentioned the young people. Now, I remember also as a young child, church was almost a 5 or 6 day a week process.
Yeah.
You had choir rehearsal on this day, you had Bible study on this day, you had usher board meeting on this day, you had service on Sunday, but it gave you something constructive to do with your time on a regular basis. Do you think, because it seems today like youth has a lot of free time, and it's possible that the church served purposes that we probably need to circle back to, perhaps with the young people, maybe.
Yeah, I believe so. And I think it'll be even more important post-pandemic.
Okay.
We've and I think lifestyles have changed so much since you and I were in church, 5, 6, 7 days a week. Um, now we have parents who are, we're off to soccer today, we're off to softball tomorrow, and there's basketball practice and there's swimming practice at 5 in the morning. So when do you get the kids there?
Mm.
Or families where mom's working, dad's not there, dad's working, mom's not there. How do the kids get to the church? So we have to be more creative about getting the church to the young people, which technology is going to, fortunately
Gotcha.
help us in. But we've really got to take a stand for that.
Gotcha. Now, I'm going to segue to another thing because you mentioned something, transportation. It used to be Black churches were very involved with the social issues of the Black community, and, um, you know, doing voting registration or whatever. But I had a conversation with a pastor, I want to say maybe 6 months or so, and he was saying that he could not arrange van rides to and from polls because it would affect his 501c3 status, right? So is the Black community not servicing the social needs of the Black community? It used to be a place where we could collect and gather and, you know, kind of come together for enhancement, movement forward
Mm.
for social issues and stuff like that. The Black church doesn't seem to be too involved in that now. We had this recent Black Lives Matter protest over the summer or whatever, but I didn't really see the churches out there like I would have saw back in the 60s with the civil rights movement. Is there some reason why the church has stepped back from Black issues and Black causes?
It's multi-forked there. I think
Okay.
I think part of what happened is the move of the Black church into prosperity preaching in the 80s and 90s. So we became, in my opinion, a little bit less about community and more about prosperity.
Mm.
I think it was Pastor Otis Moss III of Trinity in Chicago. I had a quote. I want to make sure I get it right, but basically he was saying that if preachers like some of the H. Beecher Hicks and some of the great um, minded theologians, Black theologians of the 1970s and 80s, had been on television as opposed to, say, Pastor Dollar or Carlton Pearson in the 80s and 90s, how different would the landscape
Mm.
of our Black church be? Because we got so far off into God wants to bless you, God wants to give you, that we kind of lost touch with, and the world around us saw that. The world
Mm.
around us saw a lot of churches saying, well, you know, you're so consumed with everybody should have a BMW and everybody should have a new house that you've lost touch with the grassroots.
Hmm.
But not all churches. I think there are
Yes.
many, Pastor Moss for one, Pastor Colvin here, Pastor Richard Gibson here in Cleveland are doing some amazing things. And a lot of grassroots pastors are still right there at that space where we're looking at what's happening in our communities and we want to be involved. So there are two or three groups that I'm involved with here who did a major effort for Souls to the Polls in November.
Gotcha. Okay.
We are going out fearlessly, leading people because our voting was open, I think, for 2 weeks before the election. You could go every day.
Hmm.
So we were getting people there through the week. We were getting people there on Sundays. And it's like, okay, you've got to take a step up and be like we were in the 50s and 60s, our forebearers, and say, we've got to do this fearlessly if it's going to be done.
Hmm.
So I think to your question, I think we are coming back around to that point where there's a realization that, okay, we lost a generation because we were focused on the
Yes.
wrong thing.
Yes, yes. That prosperity preaching, I hear a lot of the young folks complaining that they see it more to be more about the money than the spirituality. And I always tell them, well, prosperity preaching has been around for a while. You need to watch some videos of Reverend Ike. And that
Right.
that man had tens of thousands of people, prosperity preaching. And he had people of all races in his congregation. But and I think that's another thing too, that I just really wish we would find some sort of way to reconnect with the young folks. And they really seem to have a strong dissatisfaction with where the Black church is today. One of the reasons is because of the prosperity preaching. They really want their spirit fed.
Mhm. And another is that young people, and surveys bear this out both in the Black church and across the board with society, younger generations are more involved with doing
Mm-hmm.
than with sitting and listening.
Okay.
So whereas we may have a hub of young people, a core who will come to our services and take part in this, that, and the other, but we see what happens in the street. We see what happens when we're painting BLM in the middle of 93rd Street here in Cleveland, and the hordes of people who come out and want to be involved. So we have to be where Jesus was. We
Mm-hmm.
can't cluster ourselves in the silo. We have to go to the people as the master did.
Yes, right. That's right. Now, another trend that I see a lot, because technology is wonderful and I can go to YouTube and just click on whatever service in whatever city and state that I want to and watch. A lot of younger generation pastors are really pushing the concept of the multicultural church. And we should be all embrace it. But, I guess me being selfish, the Black church was like our one little last haven that was ours for our spiritual relief and everything. Am I wrong to be upset about multicultural churches? I mean, that's our space. Black church is our space. That's our music, our gospel. That's us.
I completely get that, and it's our culture is so amazing that the dean of my theology school, Dr. Sterling Glover, that I love dearly, used to say that the Black church is God's last line of defense.
Yes, indeed.
And so I love the culture of it. I love what we bring to our worship.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there are times where not a push for multiculturalism, but an openness to it is necessary.
Okay.
I have a dear brother in just outside of Chicago who's a son of our church. He came out of Avon Avenue Baptist, who pastors near Chicago now. He leads a congregation that is in a community that has changed over the last 15 years from white to Black and Latino.
Mm-hmm.
And so he leads this congregation as a fiery Black minister with white congregants, Latino congregants who live right in an apartment building next door, Black congregants. And so sometimes it just comes to you Um, do we press for it? I'm not about separation. But I think that there's space for everybody. There's space for us to be who we are and to be our authentic selves. And Christ will draw who he draws where he draws them.
Okay. Now let me play devil's advocate for a minute, Pastor Ribbins.
Okay.
You've got a young kid that comes to you, maybe he's 15, 16, and he says, Pastor Ribbins, I want to be a pastor because I heard you can make a lot of money being a pastor.
let me pull up my phone and show him my bank account.
I heard I could get me a Benz and a nice house. I want to be a pastor.
I try to check people right there. And that's one of the reasons why I ran for ministry for years. Is going back to my family business. We were not just a place where people came to buy their church supplies and their Bibles and their music, but it also was kind of a clearinghouse for the news of what was happening in churches around town. We heard what pastor got kicked out. We heard, whose music director was going with who, and, all those types of things, and how much people were making in the big shiny cars. I'm like, okay, Lord, I know you have a calling on my life, but if it's just about that, I don't want it. If it's just about, flashy suits and not living the life that I'm preaching about, I don't want it. And so I've always, when people, young men and young women have come to me, I always try and tell them, it's not glamorous. You'll spend more time crying than you will smiling. You'll have days where you wish you could be at home and you're, pre-pandemic visiting a hospital, taking time and sitting with a sick member, going to visit someone in jail that doesn't even know you, but mama said, could you go visit my boy in jail? Those are the types of things that real ministry are. All the other stuff that you see, particularly on TV, because there's so much of it and internet, it's not accurate. So judge wisely and go into this with your heart and not with your head.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I know many years ago, in Los Angeles, they have the Black Business Expo, and there was actually, I don't want to name names, but there was actually one of the mega churches here that had a booth on how to run a church as a business. And that really didn't sit in my spirit well, because I felt that it would be drawing people into ministry for an entrepreneur aspect versus, here it is, I want to save souls and have an impact that way. And I think sometimes, like I said, when it comes to the younger generation, they're so in tune to certain things. And I really think a lot of the pushback comes from that element. The churches really doesn't serve a purpose for them because they see it as a money-making thing. And I just really think that they would be more enticed to get involved with the church if some aspects kind of shed their skin. But that's good.
I get that. Transparency is important there. And there's that duality that, particularly because of the things that government has done over the last 30 years. Yeah, you better know how to run your church as a business. You better make sure that everything is done to the letter, but let that be this side, and let the spirituality be the top of the house.
Okay. So do you teach jazz to your young congregation there?
I have no problem showing them what's new or what's hot. And one of the great things about, my last position is having run into a lot of believers in the field, a lot of devout Christians that when we get together, we have a great time. Kirk Whalum, Jonathan Butler, just to name a couple, and kind of became a surrogate road pastor to some musicians. Some people who would call and say, I need prayer, for this, for that, and the other. So even that for me was a part of the ministry. Okay.
All right. Now let me totally switch reels here for a second. So back when I was a young girl going to church, one of the things you always used to hear the older sister say was, need to go to church to find you a good man or a good woman. So today, is the church still a good place to find you, or would I be better off at the nightclub?
I think it's about as much as it ever was, because it wasn't that great back then, and it's so now. And I think what happens also is, as we see the aging of our congregations, as we see, and we will continue to see, especially because of pandemic and the effects that'll have on who comes to church, I think it's going to become more difficult to find a suitable mate within the congregation, because here's one of the things that we as pastors have been discussing here in Cleveland, and I'm sure throughout the country. What you started with, being able to sit at home in your jammies and watch church, and because we've got to be online or on Zoom, it's not going from 11 to 1 o'clock anymore. We're topping out at an hour. People aren't going back to that. Younger generations and some older are not going to be able to bear our attention span, which is now saying, okay, we can get all this done that we used to do in 2.5 hours in 1 hour, and we still sang and we still preached and we still shouted. Plus the fact that younger people are going to be able to say, okay, I've given this hour of my faith. I've been enriched. I've been enhanced. I've been renewed, revived. And now I can go on with my day because I've got this to take care of and that to take care of. So we're going to have to even look at that aspect of who comes back and when differently. So as far as meeting people, it's going to be a kind of a brand new world.
I never thought about that because my church has 3 services, and I never thought that post-pandemic that it would not go back to that. So I guess churches are going to have to make some shifts post-pandemic, whenever post-pandemic is.
Right. Fortunately for our congregation, when I came 2.5 years ago to Avon Avenue, I was coming from Imani United Church of Christ, which is a growing ministry in Euclid, Ohio, one of the suburbs. Pastor Michelle Humphrey was my pastor. By necessity, as the church grew, as the congregation grew, they went to 3 services. They had an 8 a.m. service, a 10 a.m. service, and a noon service. And it was very succinct. You had a great service, but then you had to clear out for the next, and then you had to clear out for the next. So I became accustomed to, okay, we can do this in 90 minutes or less.
Yeah, okay.
And when I walked into the pastorate at Avon, service started at 10:45, and maybe we're walking out at 1:30, 1:45. And one of the things that I've always in my consulting spoken to churches about, you walk into a room and say, who has a favorite TV show? Is it an hour long? If it's an hour long, do you get up? Do you go and get something to drink? Do you go to the bathroom and pause it? Do you go to the movies? 90-minute movie, 2-hour movie. How often do you get bored? And when you think in those terms, it's easier to understand that, okay, we're holding people hostage for 2.5 hours. And if we're not delivering something that's enhancing their lives, that's going to make them be able to go out and live differently and better Monday through Saturday, then they're going to tune out.
Gotcha. I grew up in a very diverse environment, and sometimes I would go to church with my white friends, and I would be amazed, like, oh, we're in and out in like 45 minutes. Like, what is that? I have yet to figure, I'll be 52 this year. I have yet to figure out why Black services are like 4 days and 2 hours and 26 minutes. And you're happy about it. Unless it's a game. I'm a football fan. Unless it's a game or something coming on. But otherwise, preach, Pastor. Go. We're gonna sit here.
Take your time.
Take your time, Pastor. Take your time. But I have yet to figure out why. But maybe, going back to where the Black church evolved from, it was to provide spiritual fulfillment to last you Monday through Saturday. So we needed a little extra, but, I just remember that when I was young, like, going to the white church, it's like, this is it? 45 minutes? Y'all done? Like this, we got the rest of the day to ourselves? Oh, okay.
That absolutely ties into our history because,
Yes.
you know, as those who were enslaved were given that opportunity to say, okay, we're going to give you this day because we want you to worship. So it was everything. It was preaching, it was singing, but it was also community. It
Mm-hmm.
was time of fellowship. It was time of plotting and planning, you know, what we were going to do. And so we extended that day. And then post-slavery, it began to grow. And as we grew socially into different organizations, as people began to get involved in Masonic orders and Eastern Stars and fraternities, then some of those types of elements came in. So have you ever seen, I don't know, did Winston-Salem have the East Coast ushers that, you know, kind of like marched in rhythm and cut steps and
Yes,
everything?
yes, yes, indeed, yes.
So all of that began to take a part of our church services. So it's the richness of what we did when we came together that kind of made that fellowship so special. And yeah, you didn't mind because it was enriching spiritually, but it was also kind of entertaining.
Yes, indeed. The Black church is definitely entertaining, from our music to listening to the pastor, the way he preaches his sermon. It is a production. It is just, you walk out of there after Sunday service ready to just do your thing and get through the week. And I have noticed, because I've been going to church for all these years, sermons have segued from, your spirit, getting your spirit full, to a friend of mine said it best a couple of weeks ago. Some pastors now are motivational speakers. The
Yes.
subject matter is a little different than scripture, but and that's it. But everything evolves, everything changes. So I guess you couldn't be preaching the same concepts in 2021 as we were in 1952. So, but I never really thought about that. Yeah, I guess some of them are, and I have to say some because not everybody's doing the same thing. But some of the messages are more motivational, just like we had Reverend Ike back in the day with the prosperity preaching or whatever. But it's very interesting where we're going, and I'd love to see where we'll be in another 10 years or whatever. But it's always been something very near and dear to me and a lot of us, the Black church. I want to ask you, because I got to get you on your way here. I want to do my random question, and then I want to, because we do have technology and we can catch Sunday service with you online in our pajamas. So let me do the random question and get you on your way here, Pastor Ribbins.
All right.
Let's see what we got. Hopefully it's not unsanctified. Well, okay. You don't have to tell me the name, but do you still remember the name of the first person you had a crush on?
Oh, goodness. Do I? Yes. Yes,
all right.
I do.
You don't have to tell me the name. So how do we, now you're doing some wonderful things at Avon Avenue Baptist Church, some things that I like to see churches do. You're involved in the community and everything like that. But how do we catch your service? How do we stop by and visit service after the pandemic is over? How do we reach you?
Okay. Directly to me by email. You can reach, I'll give you the easy one, jazzpreacher@gmail.com, JAZZPREACHER, jazzpreacher@gmail.com is the easiest way to contact me by email. You can catch our Sunday worship services on Facebook and YouTube, facebook.com/Avon Avenue Official, all spelled out. Mm-hmm. Or if you go to YouTube, my YouTube channel currently, look for M. Ribbins, RIBBINS, or you can search for Jazz Preacher Live, and that will take you to the channel where you can go back and see the services that have been before. We're at 10902 Avon Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio, on the southeast side. And post-pandemic, we'll be happy to have you come and visit.
Awesome. So even though we're currently in a pandemic, Sunday services, do you still have open attendance or no?
We don't. We're planning on trying a Resurrection Day and Easter Sunday service. Because we've taped off the sanctuary, we've distanced everything. We have all of the necessary health gear, monitors and thermometers and stuff on hand. But we had been holding off until the numbers began to go back down in Ohio. Okay. So for Resurrection Sunday, we're going to try and do a safely distanced service and see if folks will come and behave.
Yes, indeed. Church service is not church service without hugging on sister so-and-so.
There it is. There it is.
I remember my father's church back home. It's 4 generations, and my daughter was baptized. I took her there to get baptized. And one of the things I always share with her was we were sitting in the front pew with her in her white outfit and everything. And she started to get fussy while the pastor was there doing the thing. And before I knew it, she had been passed back all the way to the back pew. This sister said, "Hello, let me have a baby. 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 Let me have a baby." So there's a lot of touching and love and embracing that goes on in Black churches. So, we'll see how that works out. We'll see how that works out. But I love what you're doing. It just reminds me of what I grew up on. It fits my spirit, and many blessings, continued blessings. Thank you for hanging out with me.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and much success to you.
Thank you. Thank you. That is all for this week's episode of The Male Perspective. I'm your host, Lana Reid, and I will see everybody next time.